Hello, Margaret.
Good afternoon.
Are we ready to go?
We are. Welcome, everyone joining this webinar. Good afternoon from New Zealand. If you're in New Zealand, we're really keen to have this webinar as engaging as possible. So please feel free to post any questions, comments in the chat window throughout the webinar. So we'll try and address any comments and questions throughout the webinar and also at our Q&A sessions towards the end of the session. So let's get rolling. My name is Margaret. So I've been in the data and analytics space for a number of years, mainly in the technical delivery and implementation space, and recently in the architecting space as well. I am a certified cloud architect. In my spare time, I love playing badminton and running. So if you're around Auckland, you may have seen me before. So together with me to co-host is Alex Gray. He's the country manager for New Zealand. So we work together to help our customer to deliver business outcomes. So as you can see, he loves posting on Facebook. And the latest that I know of is he's very happy that his 18-year-old daughter is leaving the nest. Over to you, Alex.
That is very true. She hasn't left just yet, but it's in the cards very shortly. And I am keen for this to be an engaging session, of course. Almost as keen as I am for good news at 4 o'clock from the briefing from the Prime Minister. So let's see how we go. Awesome, Margaret. Let's get into it. Um, so just a little bit about Altis first. Did you do any? Oh no, sorry. So Altis, if you don't know us, we've been in the data and analytics space for now. This is our 23rd year. We've got offices in Sydney and London and Melbourne and Canberra, and this is coming to you directly from our New Zealand Auckland office. Our Auckland region, we're all working from home today, of course. Uh, our specialty is everything in that data and analytics space. We are vendor independent, so we work with all the vendors, especially in the cloud space. We do work in Azure, GCP, and AWS to get our customers great outcomes. Next slide. With those customers, our well over 120 or so consultants help our customers with everything from advisory, helping them on-prem or in the cloud, understand how they could, what workloads to move up and work to solve what particular types of problems, how to architect and design those solutions, through to delivering on those, really with those outcomes on the other side. And really what we're targeting today is talking about cost management, because when you're looking at those outcomes, a key element of those outcomes is understanding the cost that's going to give you that outcome, and that really can be quite a variant cost. And so it's important to understand those cost implications. That's what today's about.
Alex, you're breaking out a little bit, so you probably need to stay closer to the mic. Yeah.
Okay. And a key element for us is connecting with courage, heart, and insight. So for us, when we're out with our customers and we're helping them understand how to get those outcomes for their team, it's around making sure that we challenge appropriately and make sure that we give advice that people are going to understand and help them with giving the insight to really deliver those outcomes and get customers real value from their platforms. We do work with all the customers out there, all the vendors, sorry. We are partners with Microsoft and Azure, AWS, GCP, Snowflake, Databricks. We have delivered it all.
Just a few. So thank you all. So if you are keen to understand your cloud costs, wanting to organize your usage and billing data to know which project is using what, and how to gain insight from that data, you are in the right webinar. So here's the agenda for today. We would like to talk a little bit about what's happening in the industry in the wider context of what we are seeing in the market, what happened in our story that brought us to this webinar today, the challenges that we are facing, the paradigm shift that we are seeing, the factors contributing to that, and why you need to export your billing data to meet some of these challenges. And we will show you what we have done as a value add to our customer. We'll then go into a Q&A sessions, and we'll leave you guys with some best practices tips at the end of the webinar. So that's how we'll lay out the rest of the webinar. So over to you, Alex.
Cool. I'm taking my video off just to see if it'll improve my video, my audio quality. Hopefully it does. When on premise, what's happening with our customers is we have users who are delivering data and analytics, who are used to not having to worry about the costs of a project. They may have those upfront Capex costs when they initially set up the environment, and then they may have some BAU support costs with people, but the actual costs don't change and fluctuate very often. When they're moving up to the cloud, there are variances in that. Each project and each piece of workload of data moving up to the cloud and what you do with it has variations in cost, and those can fluctuate over a month. And knowing how to manage that, who to assign it to, how to negotiate amongst the business as to who's going to pay for things for the outcomes is incredibly important. And you need granular data to be able to do that and really be more proactive with the data rather than reactive when it comes to bills. And that's the paradigm that we're seeing is important to understand for our customers, and we help them with that.
Thanks, Alex. And I think that's the pool have known that running a select star will cost you a lot of money nowadays. And I think that's where we are coming from in terms of bringing you guys to this webinar. So what happened? We would like to tell you a story about last year. We were doing a machine learning projects for one of our clients using image recognition. So we were testing image recognition services from different vendors, attempting to get the best prediction score. So when a damaged car image is being uploaded, the image recognition service will predict whether it's a minor dent or glass shattered or a complete crash. That means a total lost with a prediction score. So we got very busy with uploading high quality images, running various models to improve the accuracy of the model. We were aware some of the free training hours available that comes from all the vendor. However, depending on the type of models that you're running, the quality of the images, the number of images, the actual cost will vary. So I spent a few days on it, and I was pretty happy with the prediction score at the end and share my findings to the client. We use it as a proof of concept using our own stack, and we built similar models for each of the vendors, and we stopped improving the models when we were happy with it. And then we left it. So when we received the invoice at the end of the month, we were expecting some costs and associated with it, but we definitely was not expecting that big of a cost. And yeah, so we immediately stopped, look into why it was costing us that much. And it was pretty obvious that we know that because even if you stop running the model, it was actually still charging us at the end. So I'm not sure whether from the audience, you can put it in the chat window that you have similar experience. But this has brought us to bringing you guys this webinar today. And I think that's bring us to the point that it is a paradigm shift from the on-prem world to the cloud world. And these are some of the factors, and our story actually demonstrated why this is happening. One of the factors that we're seeing in the cloud space is the cost and the resource usage are now more variable. Meaning that like every cloud vendor has provided a number of services, and each services has its own cost structures. It has its own free trials, and it's not necessarily easy to understand each and every one of them. And potentially it may have some gotchas at the end. And there are, for example, in our case, we know that this is the cost structure, but at the same time, it will say there are finer prints that you need to be aware of, that if you don't make any predictions, even if you kept the model deployed, it will still cost you. And at the same time, even if you have a clear understanding of what services and resources you are using, you have a good understanding of the pricing structure, it still doesn't protect you from bill shock, in the sense that the pricing structure might change over time and you need to be on top of it. And it is actually quite hard to keep up to date with all the resources and services available for each of the cloud vendor.
Yeah, it's also important to add to that the actual costs and the componentry within the cloud can vary in a way that you have so much more control over these things. You can change the costs change regionally. They cost in different services, and dedicates a service or have a scale of service that you can then turn off at times and then have on it at other times. You have so much more control over the components and the cost implications, and often those controls are things that people don't really understand. You used to, on an on-prem world, keep your server running 24 7 days a week, and actually and it was always in your data center. And now actually having the control of having it come on or off at different times and use services when you need them is much more powerful, but just takes a lot more thought up front to make sure that you structure things in the right way depending on your usage, and you manage them accordingly, proactively.
Thanks, Alex. And I think another factor that we are seeing is the decentralization of procurement and of services and infrastructures. I think, in other words, it's so easy to spin up it with a click of a button. You can spin up a high-spec server. It is easier to procure, but at the same time, it's easier to forget as well. I'm not sure if you have seen any of these emails. We have seen quite a few coming at various sites that is anyone using this particular VM? It has an expensive disk attaching to it, and if no one is using it, we are going to shut it down. But again, these are after it has incurred some charges already. And also, it's easy to test software, which is a great thing. But at the same time, a lot of these free trials comes with it's really dependent on the users to remember to, after trialing up the software, you have to stop it to stop you from incurring more charges. And I think these are the things that we are seeing in the market. Again, it requires the discipline of the users themselves to remember.
Yeah, discipline that they don't historically have, because it's not been their responsibility. That's a key part. The responsibility of the cost to usage has changed, or is changing for a lot of organizations.
100%. And it's not necessarily their remit to actually keep an eye on how much they're using it. And this user pay model is definitely different from what we had in the past.
The exciting part of that is, on the other side, what you do is you're validating the costs against the outcomes. It's a great world to actually be able to realize tangible benefits, because you are having to go through that activity more frequently. We help our customers with realized ROI so that they can then justify those costs. And it can cause a very positive change in an organization as they do that as well.
Yep, and I think the paradigm shifts come with pros and cons. I think and that's what we are seeing. So one of the main source of understanding your bill data is definitely the invoice itself. It is an aggregated view of what has been used, but it only comes at a monthly level, and it's quite limiting in terms of telling you more information about, well, who is using what, why is it being used, or why is it using so much, and a lot of the times the details is actually buried, and it may be too late at times to avoid a bill shock.
Yeah, the key element of this, of course, is these invoices that you get reactively at the end of the month can be easier to get up earlier on in the life cycle of being in the cloud, when you've only got a small number of workloads, and it's not that confusing to see where the cost is. But the more things that you move up to the cloud, and you're starting to have a data lake, and you're starting to have some machine learning, and you've got a data warehouse of some nature in there, and you've got multiple workloads across different business users, suddenly it becomes much more complex to manage those costs if you're getting aggregated data and you're not getting the granular level of detail that allows you to be able to do cost accounting for it.
Yeah, and I think the other source, I think the same goes to the second source that we want to talk about, is the billing portal that comes with the cloud providers. Any of the cloud providers, there is a cost management view that gives you some level of visibilities. It is a great source. It may not be the most granular, but it still provides where the charges is coming from, and it will give you trend specific data, but it's still probably less flexible of how you want to have certain breakdowns in order to understand your particular organizational structures. And a lot of the times in the cloud environment, you have a set organization structure, dividing by project. It can be by resources and also cost center, and then folder structures. So in order for you to really understand at the granular level what is your usage and your billing data looks like, I think that's bringing us to our point that it is not sufficient with your existing portal view. So I believe for GCP, it may be it may not, it's probably 3 times a day that it gets refreshed. So it's still not that granular of a level that you may want to track your usage. And I guess where we are coming from is managing your cloud costs. It's a daily activity. It may need to be a bit more, even shorter time frame to get what you need. And that brings us to our third source of understanding your cloud cost, is actually exporting your billing data for analysis. It is the best way to analyze your cloud costs, and it is the best, one of the best practices. So if you have not turned it on, the best advice that we can give you is turn it on now, even if you don't necessarily have a dashboard to visualize it at the moment. Definitely for GCP, it needs to be turned on in order to start tracking. It is the most granular level. I think for AWS, it's refreshed up to 3 times a day, so it is very granular. And I think with Azure Cost Management Connector, you can actually export your data as well. And on a high level, this is, I think, irrespective of which cloud provider that you are using. These are the high level steps of how you would set up to visualize your billing and usage data. Setting up the right access. So it's quite key. So not everyone would have access to the billing data. You probably need to discuss with your account management team that you have, your particular project or your area have access to certain level of your billing data. It needs to be at the billing administrator level. Once you export your data, all of the vendors provide accesses, provide ways for you to download the data or export your data on a scheduled basis, be it on JSON or CSV. In most cases, you can then upload it. You can load it into a database or consume directly using a third-party visualization tool, be it Power BI, Tableau, Looker, Data Studio, etc.
These are very cool, especially when you take that exported data, put it up into a database and a data repository somewhere, probably back up in the cloud, and you're able to set up things like notifications off there that allow you to be notified if you're getting close to a certain cost threshold or usage threshold. You can have, most organizations have key people like their head of data and analytics who are getting notifications as the cost changes across a day and across a month, across a week, etc., so that they are able to proactively manage and support those things and ensure that things aren't getting out of control. It's a not just the reporting side of things, it's that next level of being able to trigger stuff and be able to get notifications off that.
Yep, 100%. And here is an example of what we've developed. This is using Data Studio for our client as our value add at the end of the exercise. If you remember our story earlier, then you can see that now we are able to lay it out for the particular project what the machine learning services that we use is costing at a daily level, and even drill down to the hourly level.
And as Peter has just thrown into the Q&A, I'm just throwing the Q&A question in. He's asked, can this strategy work across a hybrid cloud? The answer is yes, and that's one of the great beauties, is if you're exporting from all of the different clouds, if you're in a hybrid cloud environment, you got some AWS and some Azure workloads, exporting from them both, combining them together, and then doing reporting on the combined data set is a powerful way of doing it. It's something that you don't get from each individual provider because they're only able to report on their own platforms, but that combined set is where this really differentiates your control of the hybrid cloud. Absolutely, that's great.
Yes, I think the data set, well, at the probably more granular level, the columns might not be the same, but there's definitely ways to actually put it in the same dashboard so that you can actually, well, you can see it, definitely can see it side by side and have it from a multi-cloud perspective. It's the perfect way to have it all together in one place. And yeah, so going back to the dashboard itself, so it's very simple, and it's not something that we want to drive it as, but it is a customizable view of providing you at the project level and at the service level. So you can actually select just the service that you're interested in, or multiple services, or all of the services that comes under your project. And it will give you also the view of how much you have been credited based on the free trial hours that comes with the particular cloud vendor, and you can break it down at the hourly and at the hourly level if you want to, and it will give you a much quicker way to actually look at how much your particular service or services is charging you. And here's another view, which is at the usage level as well. So it is at the hour, but it's from the machine learning perspective, it's more at the node hours level. And it mainly is an example that we would like to show of what we can provide in terms of what the exported data will provide you with. It's definitely much richer and granular level than what the portal view or the invoice views can provide.
Nice.
Cool. Thank you all. This comes to our now we're into our Q&A session, so we can have a look at what else questions that we've got, and feel free to post any of the questions that you have or comments. Is it something that is relevant to your organization? Is that the trend that you are seeing in what's happening, and are there specific stories that you would like to share with us?
Got one. Who are your typical users for these dashboards? I can start. So the typical depends on your organization. Some organizations, there's a different. So we've had a couple of our customers who have centralized the initial cost for the first couple of years of cloud usage, and it's gone through a central team, maybe through your procurement team has got the cost center through to the data analytics. In that case, it goes, the users of this would be the data and analytics team to make sure that they get it. And in all cases, the data and analytics team need to understand the costs so that they can use the right component for the right use case. But most organizations are starting to pass the costs of using the cloud and the consumption of the cloud data, of the data in the cloud, through to the business units that use it. So for example, if you're building sales analytics and you're maybe doing some machine learning on your customer basket, often you will be passing the cost of that through to your customer team, your customer sales team. And so they will need to have a version of the report where they're seeing the costs, particularly for their department, so that they can manage and look at those and make sure that they're understanding if they run that, if they run that machine learning algorithm 10 times a day, it's going to cost this amount. But if they run it once a week, it's going to cost this amount. So it really is the users of these reports depend on how you're structuring the costs, but we're finding more and more it's a great way of opening the conversation to the business to say, okay, here's how you can manage it. Let's start to transition this to you.
Yeah, and I think that the project administrator probably, I think from the finance perspective, the finance person usually have access to these dashboard and as an overview and wider context. But what we're seeing is probably the project administrator who looks after the budget of the particular project they're working on will also have access to the dashboard itself and to the specific projects that they look after. And I think the more, I guess, people in the project actually know and can visualize this cost, I think it's the better. I think it is the paradigm shift that we're talking about, that we want people to be more understanding of actually what they are using or how much they are using can contribute to the cost.
Nice. Monai has asked a question around does the dashboard support custom resource tags? And what are the recommended tags you find useful in visualizing cloud costs across the multiple accounts?
Yep. So I think it depends on the different cloud providers. I think one of the best practices that actually a good lead in to one of the tips that we would like to share with you all, it's tagging, tagging or labeling. So I think tagging has a connotation of network tagging, but it's more labeling, more either tagging that these resources belongs to a particular cost center or belonging to a particular a project, and that will allow, and that will come through in the export data so that you can actually see or filtered by the tag as well.
This is one of the things where we come in on that advisory side of things. This is where we've worked with a number of customers, looking at that upfront, how you're going to account for these costs and how you're going to move them around, and how you're going to manage the projects, etc., really allows you to then figure out what you're going to do with those taggings. It's a key part of managing that. So upfront conversation is always important, and starting that mapping out with everything early on rather than reactively. What we've seen is a number of occasions where the costs weren't accounted for up front, where it's become much more of a reactive situation, and then you're going back and trying to add tags, you're trying to manage things in a different way later on, and that can just become a nightmare because you're having to circle back and unravel the chain. So the more upfront work you do in that, the better it is, and we've got a nice, easy process of sort of helping you evaluate how to tag it and what tags to put in there that we can talk about a bit later with you, or certainly individually as you come along.
Great questions.
They are good questions, Margaret. They are. Have you got any tips for us, Margaret? Have you got any general tips?
Yeah. So
look at that, best practice.
So we've touched on tagging, labeling, and it definitely provide much more visibilities and also allow for cost allocation. And like Alex has just talked about, it has to do with governance and also discipline in when you set things up in the cloud, and from an access level, how you organize your organization structure. And it's definitely something that we can help our customer with. Look for another thing that we best practice is it's trivial, but it's very important. Look for unused resources, things that are sitting there that you think that it's not incurring costs, might be incurring costs, just like our example. But it's all too often that we see that there is a server sitting there who is using it. There's an expensive disk associated with it, and just by having the disciplines to shut things down or audit things that have not been used for a while, will definitely help in terms of your cost management. Another one is enable billing alerts based on budgets. So you can set budgets for your project. Once you set budget, you can set alerts on if it's 25% being used, 50% utilization, 75% utilization. It just gives you that alert and notifications that if you're not expecting to be, for example, 75% of your budget already mid-month, then you can do something about it before you actually see the invoice, and you don't necessarily need to go into the dashboard on a daily basis. But at the same time, you can actually get notified and then check on the dashboard what is actually causing that spike in your bill. And I think finally, right sizing compute service. It's easy. It's very tempted. I think when we are building and implementing or trialing things, we want to, this is this is a right size, but you can see, with a high spec, you are very tempted to say, let's use that and see how quickly you can do things, or how much more powerful a high spec server can do for your particular project. It's so tempted, but I think it's at the end of the day, it's still right sizing and maybe start small and then ramped up slowly. If you need more, then there is an element of planning, but there is also an element of discipline on right sizing what is actually need for your project and your organization as well.
Yeah, I think that's the key part for me, is that it needs to become a discipline for you as an organization. In the past, especially on-prem, these are things that you could set up front. You could say what server or what size VM you need. You could get your support team ready. You could buy the licenses for the software that you're going to put on those servers, and everything sort of is done up front, and you don't need to sort of worry about it. When you've moved to the cloud, when you've got multiple workloads across different components in an ever-changing world where Microsoft and AWS and GCP release new components and new consumption levels and costs, etc., you need to be on top of those things on an ongoing basis. Without the detailed, granular data coming out on a regular basis, you end up being much more reactive and definitely not often not getting the best cost per bang for buck. Basically, you're not getting the bang for buck, which gives you your ROI. So really, you need to become more disciplined and be more proactive, and getting this data out in these dashboards and having good alerts and triggers on the top of that data is what is just tooling you to be able to be proactive and be able to give you that discipline to control your environment.
Yeah. And it is, and what we're providing you with at the moment is probably more high level of what you can do. But I think specifically for the specific service that you're using, be it machine learning, be it BigQuery, they have the specific best practices of how you can save costs, for example, undeploy your model, for example, or put it in a cheaper storage after a certain point in time, and remove the data from the main storage for your database. So these are specific as well that we can talk to you specific to your needs, and I think that brings us to what we are offering to our audience today, that we are definitely happy to talk to you and your account management of how you set up, how to set up, export your billing data, how to set up the process, how to get the dashboard up and running, to your to have the specific customized view that you would like to see.
We love these workshops. We love to engage with your, it becomes a powerful conversation really around how to now get even better ROI, return on investment on these use cases, how to really manage things, and really how to make sure your journey to the cloud for workloads is going to be as successful as possible. It all comes really down to these elements around making sure that you are in control of the costs. What we've seen historically is organizations who don't put this planning up front, or don't react to these initial use cases perhaps costing a bit more than they'd thought, is that they become bogged down in the political aspects around it costing more than they'd originally anticipated, and it can really negatively slow your journey up to getting those great outcomes up in the cloud. And so that agile ability. So really being more planned in there is incredibly powerful. When it comes to these workshops, we'd love to be a part of that with you.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to set up, and once it's set up, it's already there, so you can actually go and see the data straight away. And I think we've got clients come to us saying that, hey, I've got this bill shock. What do I do? What do I do now? But I think that will be very reactive and sometimes a little bit too late after the shock has happened.
Perfect.
Cool.
There's a couple of other questions there.
All right.
Do any of the platforms support direct connection instead of having to download the files? Yes, they do. You can get some direct connection. It's not necessarily as granular as you can get from the export. The exports give you a slight level of granularity, extra granularity, and also just more control over the data once you've got it out, and we can then combine it across different cloud providers, etc. That we found is just a bit more powerful. You do have the providers all do have some level of reporting across, of course, their own things, which is what we talked about earlier. But we really think for organizations exporting that data out, really being able to use it like another data source, which is really going to be your cost control, is very much more powerful.
And once you turn it on, Gary, for GCP, it goes straight to BigQuery. So essentially it's a direct access to the visualization tool, goes into BigQuery directly. So there's no downloading of the files as such for that particular vendor. Yeah. Another questions, any thoughts about companies channeling this cost to Capex rather than OPEX?
So there's a lot of companies have been successful in moving that to much more of have changed their conversation around what is a Capex and what is an OPEX cost in this case. It does take a little bit of navigation. When you're on-prem, it is a much on-premise world, even with VPNs, etc. It's a much easier delineation between those. You are upfront paying for servers and VPNs, etc., before you set up the workloads on-prem. So it becomes much easier to put that cost in a Capex side of things. There is much of a OPEX feel to moving to the cloud and having these as ongoing costs. So there is a transition that your business has to go for some of these data analytics workloads and other things up in the cloud. We've seen some very successful organizations change that conversation, and still you can capitalize some aspects of it. You just have to work with your procurement teams to work with how their cost structures are worse. And so often it's important to bring in your accounting teams at an organization earlier and embrace those conversations with them to make sure that you are accounting for things in the way that they need to. And that's where you then start to make sure you tag things correctly, etc. But you do have to have everyone come to the table with it being a bit of a paradigm shift for them.
I think it's a good conversations to have. I think now that once we have the visibility of what costs, what contributes to what, because I think a lot of companies is still asking that questions. If we add this services, if we have this new cloud platform, how much is going to cost me? And I think that a lot of the times actually people putting together the information cannot provide this answer at this stage because they don't know how it's being used, how many people are going to use, and how long it's going to be, how many people are going to use it for a duration or period of time. And I think having the dashboard, having the data there actually allows you to have that conversations whether they can channel this cost to Capex rather than OpEx. And I think another great comment from Richard is the other paradigm shift is pay-per-use billing, which gives visibility, granularity to the costs. On-premise big boxes tends to have a lot of hidden costs, supporting people, for example, and are not friendly to dividing things like CPU disk usage. While things may look more expensive, it's really just increased visibility and more granular control. Yeah, 100%, definitely. And then that conversation probably is more fact-based, like this is how much is being used by this project or by this services, and it's easy, it's probably a more visible conversations that we can have with our customers. Cool. Oh, thank you so much. No, thank you all for joining this webinar today. So we love to hear more from you. Feel free to contact myself and Alex, and I think for everyone who sign up for the webinar will be emailed with a link to the recording and the offer as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. Looking forward to doing some of these workshops. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.